Are you lonely? Me too. There's no joke. Hello everybody, welcome to tntrshmbl. And today, we're gonna talk about rites of passage and becoming the men we want to be. Because we don't want to be who we are now forever. We want to become something that we like. And I found that becoming the person you would like to be requires going through trauma and bullshit and, you know, the tribulations of life. It's like, it reminds me of that expression that people will say to you if you have really soft hands. It's like, look at your hands, buddy, you have more day in your life. It's like, true that. Going through those tribulations and that betrayal, having those shitty friends and well, watching your worldview collapse in front of you gives an opportunity to change and reflect, to meditate on what your life means and what you actually want to become. And some people, I don't think, ever actually go through this over the course of their lives, but in mine it sort of relates to the deception, my deception of what I thought the world was, and how, I guess, conversations with specific people, bad friendships, and the reactions I got for standing up to my own principles, how all of that created this Tantris humble. I'm definitely not as humble as I say. No way, buddy. Story centers around Naked Snake, who is an agent of the CIA and was trained by the legendary Boss, a war hero who led the United States to victory with her special allied forces, the Cobra unit. And Naked Snake is a soldier of the United States just doing his duty. Naked Snake can teach us a little bit about manhood and becoming the people that we are today. Like going through trauma and betrayal, dealing with that, meditating on it, and then allowing it to take you into manhood, to develop you into a proper adult, you know, like a millennial who knows how to adulting, that sort of thing. So, why might that be? Well, Metal Gear Solid 3. Released in 2004, probably one of my favorite video games of all time, and if you're in the gaming world, which I'm gonna assume that some of you are, or in some of the comments, some of you don't. And the CIA is after what's known as the Philosopher's Legacy, which is a slush fund of about $100 billion. And a slush fund is like a legally obtained sum of cash that you can use to buy stuff. Because we like buying stuff with cash. I don't know if you like buying stuff with cash, because And he finds himself in Russia in 1964. Now, before I really go into this plot, I mean, I want to go all tntrshmbl talking head style for you guys, but I need to really do a justice in getting the details of this for y'all. So let's go watch some game footage. Let's watch this footage stuff. Figure out how we're gonna be men, right? That's right, we're men. Best kind of men. We're the men of the... Naked Snake is a warrior, a true hero, and a man whose true feelings were never fully understood by others, but yet he fully embodied his own philosophy. You know, the change he wanted to see in the world after his pain, his trauma, if you will. So we have Naked Snake, and he's sent to Soviet Russia in 1964, shortly after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, to recover Soviet scientist Nikolai Sokolov after being kidnapped by Russian spies to coerce him into developing a new nuclear-equipped superweapon that could potentially bring the world to a quick and bloody and destructive demise. So it seems like a standard superhero for that time, if you think about it, you know, like James Bond or James Bond. Though the character development of Naked Snake takes you for a real ride you'd probably not expect. And we start out with Snake infiltrating Selinoyarsk in Russia to rescue Sokolov, accompanied via radio by Major Zero, paramedic, SIGINT, and what do you know, his former mentor, the Boss, the legendary war hero known for single-handedly leading Allied forces to victory during World War II. So Snake's very pleased with the addition of the latter, though it quickly devolves into catastrophe as Snake rescues Sokolov. The two escape a skirmish with local GRU officers and make their way across a bridge nearby. And so, the Boss appears suddenly at the opposite end of the bridge, accompanied by a mysterious man, a mysterious Colonel Volgin, who holds a mysterious briefcase in his hand. Now, Volgin is the main baddie in this series, but he's not the most interesting character. I think the Boss is. But anyway, a stunned Snake asks the boss just what the hell is going on. And she says, Sokolov comes with me. And in an instant, Volgin asks if Snake is coming with them, to which she says no. And Volgin, whose face cannot be recognized, cannot be seen, says anybody who knows who he is must die. And so the boss is basically given the obligation to kill her own student, her protege, if you will. And as this is all happening, she's accompanied by her comrades, known as the Cobras, the Allied forces who carried emotions into battle, who helped lead her to victory during World War II. And these Cobras are known as the Pain, the Fear, the End, and the Fury. So, as Snake cannot come with them, and the boss is given this obligation, she quickly disarms him of his weapon, breaks his arm, and throws him over the bridge. Unsurprisingly, though, the main character of the game survives, and at the same time, Colonel Volgin, aboard the boss's American helicopter, opens the briefcase, revealing a warhead known as the Davy Crockett, an experimental handheld nuclear missile, which I think actually existed in the 60s, but never really made it to the military for being too dangerous and inaccurate for practical use. But anyway, he connects it to the trigger or the gun handle and points it away at the nearest Russian base, his own comrades, and shoots the thing, exploding it. Obviously, this is insanity, but there ends up being an ulterior motive that triggers the rest of this game's plot. So Russian intel picks up on this immediately, and not knowing the identity of the perpetrator, jumps to the conclusion that this was an American attack on Soviet territory, given that this came from an American helicopter on their radars. So then President Khrushchev calls Lyndon B. Johnson via the phone in a very cheesy, campy sort of conversation between the two of them, where, you know, Khrushchev kind of has not the best Russian accent in my opinion, but, you know, he ends up interrogating Johnson on the matter. And Johnson tells him he's very aware of the incident and gives details on the boss's defection to the USSR with Colonel Volgin. So not only does Khrushchev not believe this, but he also threatens that unless the American government can prove their innocence in 3 days by killing the boss with one of their own men, the Cold War will end and Russia will release basically all-out nuclear Armageddon on the United States. And that man selected is none other than Naked Snake. So now we're reflecting on Snake in the Virtuous mission. The Virtuous mission that we just discussed, you know, of him finding out the boss actually deceived him, which is a great sort of metaphor, I think. And it's not complete yet because we're not even at the end of the story, but it's like his mother, person from whom he learned everything, his CQC skills, you know, his close quarters combat skills, his mentality, his warrior mindset, all came from her. And now she's betrayed him. She's betrayed him, and he is basically left with no choice but to kill her. Like, could you imagine what that might be like? I mean, you know, you have a parent, a father, a mother, and then sometime in your youth, they betray you, and you have to overcome your parent, the previous generation. You must surmount that to become a proper man or a proper person. I'm not trying to make this male specific. If there are females in this audience, by all means, you know, come along with. I just think that this resonates with guys a little bit more for some odd reason. Snake is deceived, and now he's basically left with no choice but to sort of kill his past, or to kill his deception. It's like the boss represented everything that he knew, but maybe he didn't really know anything at all, and that it was all a deception, and now he has to kill it to prove to himself that he is greater than her, that he is more, well, not that he's wiser, but that he can follow his own story, that he makes his own values for himself and not follow the ones provided to him by his former mentor. But anyway, let's go into Operation Snake Eater and where this leads Snake over the next couple of days. Yes. A few days later, Snake arrives once again in Selinoyarsk, fully equipped and briefed about his mission. And he's basically told that if he fails, he's gonna get the death penalty along with everybody on his team. So he lands surreptitiously in the middle of the forest at night, though is quickly caught by the boss. She taunts him, disarms him once again, destroys his gun, and gives him a little bit of an ass-kicking, as she claims he'll never be able to kill her. And thus begins one of the most poetic stories I believe, in gaming history, or at least at that time. This is 2004, just to remind you guys. So, Snake must now find his way to Sokolov, destroy the weapon that Sokolov is building for the GRU, kill Volgin, the Cobras, and the boss, all in a 3-day period. And that's just getting started. On the way, Snake meets up with someone of his own kind. Eva, the NSA codebreaker sent to debrief him on the GRU and their plan. So, Eva is also a spy, pretending to be the lover of Colonel Volgin, though her disguise has its holes, as we'll see. So upon his journey to the impregnable fortress of Groznygrad, where the Shagohod is being built, Snake finally meets Sokolov to get information from him about Volgin's intentions. And to their surprise, Volgin enters not too long afterwards and discovers Snake in the process. Sokolov and Snake are then taken to a torture room for interrogation and are beaten to a fucking pulp. So Sokolov supposedly dies, while Snake takes the beating and survives. At last, Volgin unmasks Snake and orders the boss to cut out his eyes. Though a nearby Ocelot, an accomplice of Volgin, distracts everybody by trying to taunt a nearby Eva, playing a game of Russian roulette. This isn't really normal Russian roulette, this is one-player Russian roulette, with 3 revolvers as he juggles each and pulls the trigger each time one lands in his hand. Snake, suspended in the air, interrupts him last minute by bumping into him, and in the process, Ocelot shoots out his eyes, giving him the iconic look that he's known for. Pretty gruesome, but I recommend this scene for all of you who are interested in this game. So predictably, Snake escapes this jail. So as Snake progresses through his treacherous mission, he meets the Cobra unit, killing them one by one as he inches his way towards Volgin and the boss. He kills the pain, the fear, the end, and finally, the fury. In classic hero fashion, he fells Volgin and the Shagohod in a large explosion. Snake then travels back with Eva to the escape route planned for the two of them, and despite a final scuffle in the end after crashing their vehicle, Snake and Eva make it to their destination. And there awaits the boss in a beautiful field of white flowers. After a brief conversation about the boss's past, the two engage in a final battle where Snake must use everything he knows, let go of all of his attachments to his former mentor, and kill her. And eventually he does. The boss falls to the ground and tells Snake to end it, to finally kill her, that there's only room for one boss and one Snake. So for a brief moment, you, the player, are given the opportunity, or given the obligation of pressing the square button and killing her yourself. This is not a cutscene that happens on his own, but rather you interact with it. You take on the responsibility of finally shooting her, shooting that one character that Snake cares about. And I think that was a really brilliant artistic move on Kojima's part, because you now feel more connected to the character and bear that responsibility of carrying out your mission. So after you do that, the white field turns red, and you hear a mournful tune play in the background as Snake realizes his mission is complete. So in a climactic end, he escapes with Eva back to the United States. He probably realized that he didn't just kill his mentor, he killed his pain, his fear, his end, and his fury. And it really is a tragic story, but it's poetically written, and we'll get into how this all sort of ties together, at least in my own opinion. So here's the fucked up part about all of this, right? Snake returns to the United States with Eva on their plane thing, and when they arrive back in the US, he is awarded a Distinguished Service Cross by none other than Lyndon B. Johnson. It's a sort of alternate history about all these characters of people who actually existed. But he's also awarded the title of Big Boss. He is greater than the boss for having defeated the boss, the traitor who defected to the Soviet Union and almost risked all-out nuclear war and the end of the world. So after he receives that, I mean, clearly the man is distraught. There's a very iconic scene of Snake giving a military salute in front of the boss's grave before the transition into the next scene where we're told what actually happened. So, as it turns out, according to Eva, who kind of gives Snake a post-debriefing, the boss indeed was sent to Russia to defect, to get the philosopher's legacy that I told you about earlier. But the boss did not know about the CIA's plan to basically screw her over. They were aware of Volgin's character, how he was rash and brooding and tended to focus only on his own ideals, his own goals, and that with the addition of the Davy Crockett, he would probably use that to start some sort of nuclear conflict between Russia and the United States because he's a sadist. So the CIA kept this information from the boss, and by the time Volgin exploded that base, annihilated it, and disintegrated it, the boss didn't really have any other choice but to, well, stay loyal to the Soviets, because otherwise, well, one, she would have been killed, and then it was basically her fault. Everyone blamed her because she gave the Davy Crockett to Volgin, so she couldn't even go back to the US. She was, in other words, screwed. She had no chance to survive no matter what she did, and she was a soldier. I mean, if she had any ounce of honor in her heart, it was for herself, and it wasn't for, like, her... It wasn't necessarily for her country, it wasn't for the Soviet Union. It's just for humanity, basically. But we'll get to how that sort of matters. And so Snake finds out about all of this through Eva, and as it turns out, the boss was a hero. She was a hero. She was a good person. You know, she wasn't bad. Didn't have any malicious intent to destroy humanity or cause mass extinction via nuclear weapons. She was just carrying out a mission by the CIA. And eventually, she was killed, knowing herself that she was actually the hero in the situation. But nobody else would ever knew. She died a traitor to the United States, and the only person who knew about this, or the only people who knew about this, were the CIA, all the higher-ups in the U.S. government, Eva, Solid Snake, and maybe a handful of other people whose names I can't mention. I think Ocelot probably knew about that too. But Snake is obviously disillusioned after this happens, and rightfully so. He killed his mentor, and then in the very end, when he thought his mentor deceived him, no, his mentor did not deceive him. It was his own government that did. It was the culture in which he was raised, the values of the U.S., the culture that he thought was so honest was there to, or the government he thought wanted to spread peace and liberty across the world was really just as corrupt as any other government. And Snake realizes that he doesn't want to be just a pawn in the game of, well, the US's or the CIA's ultimate strategy. And he meditates on the boss. And he's like, well, the boss was a legendary soldier. She maintained her honor until the very end. Snake realizes that, in his own case, to maintain his own sense of honor, he must follow his own ideals. He must do something himself, not for the US, not for the Soviet Union, not any government entity. Instead, it becomes his mission to create his own country with his own ideals, wherein he recruits people, other soldiers, for the causes of real soldiers. Soldiers are no longer expendable in this military, this nation state that he creates, but rather they all sort of agree that they want to fight for themselves. There's like a sort of individuality among this, well, fraternal government structure Big Boss is creating. And sadly, the way that Big Boss ends up becoming a Darth Vader character is when you create a nation state fighting its own wars across the world and creating havoc among the real sovereign nations that don't even really recognize you, you're eventually going to be seen as the villain. So Big Boss is sort of a perfect exemplar of a person who did not die a hero, but lived long enough to see himself become a villain. And I think this is just a great illustration of that. Now, I don't think any of us should become villains, but how does this relate to, like, rites of passages, right? How does this relate to us? How does this relate to manhood? And I'm interpreting this in my own particular way. I think we come from, when we come out of the womb, we have our mothers and our parents, and we think they're all good. We trust the values of our parents if they're, well, good parents and they're not abusive, of course. And then there's also a greater culture that we live in, which we assume is good. I mean, that's how I was when I was a kid. I thought the United States was just inherently a good nation. We won World War II, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with us. We were I thought we were the keepers of peace and justice all across the world. And this is like very naive for a kid. And I wanted to be virtuous myself, like my country, like the values with which I was raised. And so, you know, you protect these values over time, and you adopt them, should I say. You adopt these values from a greater power, from people who are older than you, and then you reach a certain age where you begin to become disillusioned by all of this, and those values betray you. And in my case, I was very much on like the hyper-progressive left anti-racism crowd, because I thought that anti-racism was very obvious, you know, you should not judge a person by the color of their skin. But it turns out that when I started to think about this on my own time and make claims like, well, socioeconomic background is okay, you know, it's okay to talk about, but I think the ultimate criteria by which I want to judge somebody is the content of their character. And then I said something like that among the crowd of people who I thought were my friends, were my, I guess, not supporters, but my colleagues. Everybody turned on me and basically told me that I was wrong, that I was the racist myself, and that I did not know what the fuck I was talking about. And like, I was 21. I've gone into the story many times, but that betrayal, right? That betrayal that I received from the very people I loved, from the culture that I thought I was upholding, was traumatic for me. In the same way that it was probably traumatic for Big Boss to realize the levels of deception that he was experiencing to become what he ultimately did, what he ultimately became. And it's one of the reasons I now kind of have like my own identity crisis in relation to the United States, because I want to be my own person. I want to have my own value system. And that's not to say I have my own original ideas, but instead of adopting something that is prescribed to me, I'd rather think for myself, cliche as that sounds, and hold on to those values, defend them, and defend them only for myself, and see how they kind of play out in the public discussion. And that's the way that I've sort of interpreted all of this, is you need to go through some betrayal, you need to go through some trauma, you need to be betrayed by your culture a little bit to recognize the value that is here within yourself, to become, well, become original, to become like a free thinker, if you will. But I don't think you can become a free thinker, or it's probably a lot more difficult to become a free thinker when you don't experience that sort of deception, when you realize the values that you were upholding given to you by others were not as pure as you once thought they were, and the way that you recognize that and the way people react to your recognition thereof all kind of, it makes you feel isolated, it makes you feel like nobody really gives a shit about you. I've rationalized it now where I'm okay that I don't share values with the majority of the people around me. I have my own beliefs and I'm ready to talk about them. I'm ready to change if I have to, but I would rather that than mindlessly adopt the ideas of somebody else and then feel virtuous in upholding them and defending them, because they're not, I didn't arrive at those conclusions myself. I arrived at those conclusions, you know, via school, via the media, via what was taught to me. And this might sound a little too doomer, but yeah, the moral of the story, I think, in Metal Gear Solid here is life is going to deceive you, and through that deception, it teaches you to think for yourself. It teaches you to create your own values. It's very existential, in a sense. Now, the religious people in this channel probably might have their own disagreements with me, because you can, I mean, that's sort of a utilitarian perspective where you can justify basically anything to yourself if you think that it breeds maximum happiness. But I think that's an interpretation of Metal Gear Solid 3 that I hold true to myself and is pretty useful. Gives me the courage to even speak out as I do, because I don't need the validation of a culture that I feel doesn't even tell the truth to me half the time anyway. And it's time to take matters into our own hands. How you do that is really up to you. But yeah, there you have it. A little bit of a dissection of that particular game. And for anybody who's made it this far, we're finally at the end of the video. Just questions for you is, I like the talking head format a lot, where I get to speak at you for 10 minutes at a time. But it's also more difficult for me to get as deep as I'd like to, because it's not that I'm thinking on my feet. I have notes, but if I'm reading from a script, I have particular word choice that I like to use, and ideas that I've meditated on for long enough, that I've formulated the thoughts in a very particular way that I want to share with all of you. But it might make me lose the essence of the channel in the whole, like, hey, you know, I'm just sharing my thoughts with y'all, and this is my, you know, rough take on something. Do with that what you will. Don't know if a lot of you have stayed this long, but either way, I'm happy that you have, if you have. And I'll catch you later on in sometime between now and later. Otherwise, booyah!